Hello, this is John Miyares with the USDA NASS Great Lakes Regional Field Office in East Lansing, Michigan. In this video, we're going to go over the basics of sections A, B, and D of the VCUS questionnaire. Please note, I do not plan on going into great detail on these sections, as much of what is being covered is very similar to what has already been covered in previously recorded videos for the ARMS 2 training. If you need additional detail, I would recommend reviewing the information on the ARMS 2 page or reviewing your interviewer's manual for the VegChem survey. In Section A, you are to record information about the target's total acres operated, including acres owned and rented, total acres of cropland, and total acres of cropland planted to vegetables in 2020. Before asking the questions on the page, review the data from the acreage insert that came in the kit envelope. The form will show what acres were reported by the operator on the integrated screening survey, which took place during May, June, and July. If the acreage insert is correct, you can enter a 1 in box 801, then skip to section B. However, if any part of the acreage insert is not correct, then we will need to ask all of the questions in section 1. The layout of the acreage questions is no different from what we currently ask on our quarterly agricultural surveys, except that acres are to be reported to the nearest tenth of an acre instead of the nearest whole acre. The only difference is in question 4, where we also ask about the total acres planted to vegetables, including both target and non-target vegetable crops. As a reminder, any double-cropped acres should only be reported once. On this slide, you see an example of the layout for Section A on the VegChem questionnaire. As you complete this section, be sure to verify that the total acres operated includes all cropland, waste, woods, pasture, and land in government programs. Cropland should include all tillable cropland, including land planted to field crops, fruits, vegetables, hay, floriculture, nursery crops, fields and summer fallow, idle cropland, cropland in a crop pasture rotation, and cropland in government programs. In question 4, be sure to include all vegetable crops, including any non-target vegetable crops. In Section B, you are provided a table to record acres of target vegetable crops. As a reminder, the target crops for each state in our region are as follows. For Indiana, pumpkins and watermelons. For Ohio, pumpkins and bell peppers. For Michigan, asparagus, cucumbers, snap beans, pumpkins, and squash. A listing of the target crops for each state and their crop codes is listed on page 5 of the paper questionnaire. Each line of the table on page 6 should include one specific crop and all of the acres planted to that crop. All 4 columns need to be filled in for each line in the table, including the crop name, crop code, acres planted to that crop to the nearest tenth of an acre, and whether or not pesticides were applied to that crop. As a change from previous years, if the operator did not apply any chemical herbicides, insecticides, or fungicides to a particular crop, you are to enter a 3 into the appropriate cell. In past years, the choices for those cells were 1 for yes and blank or dash for no. Also, be sure to pay attention to the include-exclude statements on the right-hand side of page 6. One important exclusion that gets overlooked is to be sure to exclude new plantings of vegetables not intended for harvest in 2020, which should only impact new plantings of asparagus in Michigan. Newly planted asparagus will have a different spraying regimen than asparagus intended for harvest, so it will be important that new plantings of asparagus get excluded. Also, please do not put different fields with the same crop on different lines of the table. All fields planted to the same crop can be consolidated on a single line. Let's look at how we might record information in the Section B vegetable acreage table. Suppose you were working with a Michigan producer who grew 40 acres of watermelons, 83.4 acres of asparagus, 10 acres of pumpkins, and 13.5 acres of squash. He applied commercial herbicides to everything except the squash. How should Section B be filled out? Why don't you pause this video to see if you can work this one through on your own before progressing to the next slide. Alright, let's look at how we did. Since this grower is in Michigan, we would not want to include the watermelon information here. So we shall record the asparagus, the pumpkins, and the squash. The crops themselves can be listed in any particular order as long as they are properly accounted for with the correct crop codes and acreage. Had this been an Indiana operator, we would have kept the information on pumpkins and watermelons. For Ohio, we would have only counted the pumpkins. Next, we're going to move along to Section D, which is the pesticide applications table. You might be wondering why there isn't a Section C in this questionnaire. Section C is historically where we record commercially prepared nutrients and fertilizers applied to target vegetable crops. These questions are only asked every other time we run the survey. Since we did ask these questions in 2018, we are not asking them again in 2020. In order to minimize confusion and not have to change our training materials every time, Section C is simply skipped in years that fertilizer data is not collected so that the pesticide table can always be associated with Section D. The layout of this table and the questions asked are almost the same as what is seen in the ARMS Phase 2 questionnaire. The only significant difference is that we must identify the crop name and the crop code on each line of the table, since we can record pesticide application information for multiple vegetables, compared to the ARMS 2 questionnaire, which focuses on a single target crop. In the leftmost column, legibly record the name of the chemical applied to the crop specified in column 1. In column 2, enter the crop code associated with the crop name. As a reminder, crop codes can be found in the table on page 5. In column 3, record the 5-digit product code associated with the chemical applied. The chemical codes can be found in your respondent booklet or in the all-inclusive pesticide listing posted on the Purdue GLR website. In column 4, you should report whether the product was purchased in liquid or dry form. Then in column 5, indicate whether the chemical applied to that crop was part of a tank mix and which line of the table represented the first chemical in the mix. Make sure that you record different products on different lines, including those that are part of tank mixes. Additionally, if the same product was applied multiple times but at different rates, the separate applications must be reported on separate lines. There are some products which have very similar names and similar active ingredients, but the concentration of the active ingredient may differ between the products. In order to help distinguish which product code to use for similarly named products, check to see if an EPA registration number can be found for the product. The EPA number can be checked against the other products in the respondent booklet and the all-inclusive pesticide list. If you are still having trouble finding the correct product code, it is possible that the product being applied is too new to be in any of the databases. Have your supervisor reach out to the regional office staff to do some digging on those chemicals. If worse comes to worse, a new chemical code can be requested for a new product. Finally, don't forget to record the number of lines used in the table. Although this is an office use box, this number will be needed when you eventually transfer the data into the CAPI instrument. Knowing this number will help make sure all applications are accounted for properly. As a reminder, the product code and product form, liquid versus dry, must agree. However, we have seen times in the past where the product form listed in the respondent booklet is not correct. Please be sure to leave a note if this does become an issue, and please contact the regional field office so that the oversights listings can be updated with the most correct information. A tank mix is defined as two or more products mixed together in a single tank and applied simultaneously to a target crop. Typically, the two chemicals are going to be targeting different pests or will have different modes of action, but are sprayed in the mix out of convenience in order to minimize the number of trips taken across the field with machinery and the amount of time it takes for the operator to apply the pesticides to the field. Each product within the tank mix should be recorded on a separate line. In column 5, you should record the line number of the first product in the mix. In this example, the operator applied the insecticide Lanate in a tank mix with the herbicide Frontier to their asparagus crop. The Lanate is recorded on line 1 and the Frontier is recorded on line 2. To indicate that they were applied as part of the same tank mix, we record a 1 in column 5 on both line 1 and line 2. If the two chemicals were applied separately, then the cells in column 5 should be left blank. Finally, do not confuse tank mixes with packaged premixes. If you have concerns on how to record a packaged premix, please leave good notes or contact your supervisor on how best to proceed. On page 9, in either column 6 or 7, you want to record the application rate per acre or the total amount applied for each chemical. Most operators will report rates per acre, but on some farms that have smaller fields, this may be reported as a total quantity applied. Do not fill in answers for both columns 6 and 7. Only one or the other is needed. Values in columns 6 and 7 should be recorded to 2 decimal places. In column 8, be sure to record the appropriate unit codes and make sure that the unit code matches the formulation. For dry products, the most common codes used are 1 for pounds and 28 for dry ounces. For liquid products, the most common codes will be 12 for gallons, 13 for quarts, 14 for pints, and 15 for liquid ounces. All the available codes are listed above the table on page 9. If an operator reports applying the product in parts per million, please be sure to leave good notes. In column 9, record the acres treated with the product to 1 decimal place, and in column 10, record the number of times the product was applied. For tank mixes, the values in columns 6, 7, and 8 may differ for each product, but columns 9 and 10 must be the same. For multiple applications of the same product, record the rate per application, not the total for all applications. When considering how the computer will interpret your responses, it will generally multiply the rate or quantity reported in columns 6 and 7 by the number of applications in column 10. For example, suppose an operator reported to you there were 3 separate applications of a particular product made during the season, and the application rate was 2 pints per acre for each application. We will want to record the 2 in column 6, the 14 in column 8 to indicate pints, and a 3 in column 10 to indicate there were 3 applications at 2 pints per acre. The computer will then interpret this as 3 separate applications of 2 pints per acre for a total of 6 pints per acre applied during the growing season. We do not want to combine the applications and enter this as 6 pints per acre in column 6 applied 3 times, because if we did that, the computer would interpret that as a total of 18 pints per acre of the product applied to that field. Here are a few other reminders regarding the pesticide application table. Do not record the spray volume applied to the field. Most chemicals are heavily diluted before they are applied, so to say that one sprayed 100 gallons of a chemical per acre would not be appropriate. Do not include surfactants, adjuvants, or carriers in the spray solution. A list of common adjuvants has been posted to the Purdue GLR website. Do not record liquid fertilizer solutions in conjunction with a pesticide. These would normally be recorded in the Section C fertilizer tables if we were asking questions from Section C this year. Use the conversion table if necessary if other units are offered. For example, if someone reports applying a product in tablespoons, well, 2 tablespoons is equivalent to 1 dry ounce. Finally, as was mentioned in the previous slide, be sure that the unit code in column 8 and the formulation code, liquid versus dry, are consistent. Here are a few other reminders. In column 9, you cannot report more acres were treated than acres planted. If there were multiple applications or if the target commodity was double cropped, be sure to account for the acres only once. If there were repeated applications of the same product at the same rate on the same area for the same crop, that can be indicated in column 10. However, column 10 can only be used to indicate a repeated application if everything in columns 1 through 9 are identical for the repeated application. If it is part of a tank mix that you are saying has multiple applications, then the number of applications reported in column 10 must be identical for every chemical in the tank mix. It is not possible in a tank mix to say that one chemical was applied once and a second chemical was applied twice. There will be times when the chemical applied by the operator cannot be found in the respondent booklet. When this happens, you can record this information in question 2, which is directly below the pesticide application table. First, record the line number of the pesticide application that the information refers to. Then try to provide as much information as possible about the product. What type of pesticide is it? Is it an insecticide, herbicide, fungicide, miticide, plant growth regulator, a defoliant, a desiccant? If it is available, collect the EPA registration number. This is the best way for us to link a chemical to a product code. The EPA number is generally available on the product label or the material data safety sheets which come with the product. If the product does not have an EPA number, then most likely it is not a regulated pesticide, but we can verify that for certain when researching the product at the regional office. Finally, you should record whether the product was in liquid or dry form when it was purchased, and even where the product was purchased. If we know who the vendor was, we may be able to contact the vendor to get more information about the product. The pesticide application table in Section D has 33 lines for one to record chemical applications. If more lines are needed than are available to record chemical applications, use the supplemental forms. Be sure to record all identifying information, including the name, the POID, and so on the supplements. If supplements are needed, make sure that you do not split tank mixes between 2 different tables. All chemicals included in a tank mix should be included on the same table. Please note that the newly designed CAPI instrument to be released for the 2020 survey is not going to have supplements with it. Instead, it is expected to allow as many chemicals as the enumerator will need to enter. At this time, as this recording is being created, the CAPI instrument is not available for review, so we are unable to demonstrate its capabilities at this time. To get a general understanding of how the CAPI instrument is expected to work, we recommend you review the CAPI demonstration video for the ARMS 2 survey, as many of the features in that instrument will be included in the VegChem CAPI instrument.